just to say, if you hear any bangs or crashes, that will be because I'm surrounded by people letting off fireworks. Ironically, where I was in Harrogate before, you very rarely got anybody sending up fireworks because nobody really had any gardens. Round here, everybody has gardens, but why for the life of me people don't shoot them up rather than sort of across other people's houses, I don't know. Not awfully fond of that, I have to say, and there's been a few stray fireworks which I think have come a little bit close to my property, so anyway, yes, we've had a very busy week this week. We're now in the Kingdom season, so we've celebrated All Saints and All Souls. All Saints are always important for me because I got confirmed on that date, and that was 9 years ago this year. My mother replied when I told her that you know, it had been 9 years. She said it was like a whole lifetime ago, and largely it was. I was doing very, very different things. I was in London for a start, so it's a whole world away from what I'm doing now, what I've been doing for a long time now. But there we are. In a similar vein, but not quite so long ago, it is exactly a year ago today as I film this that I visited Markenfield for the first time. I don't think it came up in my blog at the time because it wasn't thought of immediately as a huge possibility. But at the time I was desperate to leave Granville by Christmas, and my mother we tried part buy part rent, and that had fallen through several times, and I was now looking for a place just to rent, and so she gave me a list, and one of the houses on this list was the one I'm in now, and she said it was to buy, and of course that wasn't a thing that I'd really thought possible on my wage or anything like that. But on the 5th of November, which was a Saturday last year, before the fireworks event on the Stray, she took us on a tour in the car of all the places that were on this list that she thought would be worth looking into to see if I could rent, and this house on Markenfield Road. And that's where we came. We came round the corner. We couldn't find it originally. We went the wrong way. And then as we were passing very slowly, I said, "Look, there's a woman's face in the top room." And everybody looked and nobody saw it, and I felt a bit silly. And then we went round the back where there's private parking, and my mother started snooping up the path that actually leads to the back door. And as we were doing that, we were caught red-handed by the person who owned the property, whose wife had been in the top bedroom and had seen us, and he came out and asked us if we wanted an immediate viewing, which was fantastic. So in we came and up we went, and well, we've never looked back since, have we? Here we are, a year on from there, sitting on those steps, owning that house. How fantastic is that? We have made great leaps in our 5-year plan that was launched about 2 years ago, and that was one of the things on it, was to leave Granville, and we've done that now. So onwards to the next thing, which we'll probably be sorting out next year. I was asked by a few people online to give my thoughts on what's going on with the Jimmy Saville inquiry. First of all, I have to say that it can't all be true, can it? Because to think that he got away with molesting half the women and children in this country was seen by the other half, and nobody said a word in 40 years, is extraordinary. I mean, it just didn't happen. to say he's guilty of every single thing that he's being accused of, I think would be incredibly false. However, the amount of people that have come forward, there has to be a grain of truth in it, and I think there was a grain of truth when it was brought up years ago but sort of not really pursued. So I think he's probably guilty of doing some naughty things, but maybe not quite as many naughty things as we think of. The other thing that I can't understand at all is how many people you now have cashing in on stories. You've got two sets of people. You've got the victims, and they just keep coming out of the woodwork. Poor victims who could never speak about their terrible ordeal are coming out in droves. There's not one, there's not, you know, there's 10, there's 20, there's 100, there's 200. There's something about, you know, anybody now who has ever been in his presence, particularly if they are a woman or if they had children, will be, oh yes, I knew all along, sort of thing. And there's a lot of people, aren't there, who were, I don't know, who drove his van around or whatever, or was his personal secretary, and I saw it all, but I never said a word. As if we're supposed to think now how brilliant they are for coming forward, you know, 40 years later, and, you know, colluding or supporting various victim statements. I mean, they are as sick as him if they have seen what's going on and haven't said a word. And there's a few of those, and they're selling their stories to papers. You know, I saw him molest 50 billion women in the back of the van as I was driving, and we're all supposed to say, well done for coming forward, you know, and here's your cheque for cashing your story. Call me a cynic, but the main point here is, for whatever reason, and however badly you judge him, he's dead. He can't defend himself, he can't be punished. I do, however, support them doing inquiries. I always support them being open and investigating these things. I do think that you have to remember the zeitgeist was very different back then, and some of the things that you could get away with back then you possibly can't get away with now, but at the time wouldn't necessarily have been thought of in quite such a negative light as it is today. So I think you ought to remember that. But there are questions about why any person who was a volunteer would be able to do anything unassisted. You don't do that even if you are a philanthropist and a volunteer. You would still surely be supervised at all times, because you're not a paid employee, are you? So, you know, to start giving him keys to different hospitals and stuff like that, well, I think the hospitals have a little bit to answer for there. Again, perhaps they wouldn't have suspected anything like that back then, whereas now it would be common practice for that sort of thing never to happen. I don't know, but I am a bit sick and tired of hearing about it, to be sure. And I hope they do the inquiry as quickly as possible, get to the bottom of it, arrest those people who they think are, you know, conspirators, and then this can die down, lessons learned, and we can stop hearing about the next person to come forward saying, you know, he's smiled at them inappropriately, or, you know, they were his best friend, saw it all and never said a word. So that's my thoughts on that. It would be different, I have to say, if he were alive. It would be very different. My stance would be very different if he was alive. But he's not, so a lot of this is going to be all conjecture, 40 years old. I don't know if you can tell, but I have struggled with a bit of a cold this week. It's not as bad as it was. It never got really bad. It was sort of a head cold, really, although I did think I was going to get a Christmas cough rather early, and that seems to have subsided as well. I followed the old wives' tale of feed a cold and starve a fever, because I never get a fever, and I do love any excuse to feed myself. Unfortunately, that has meant that I've spent more this week than I should have done, but I've got sort of better, so perhaps it wasn't so bad after all. We just need to keep an eye on that next week. What else to say? A November holiday coming up in about 2 weeks. It's a week off during which I shall be doing my Christmas shopping. And how am I affording this? Well, I decided to only put my savings into the account 11 months of the year, basically, which means I'm spending my savings for November on Christmas. That's £50, which is the building insurance sort of fund, £30, which would be for the holiday fund, and an extra £40 that we will have spare because we've cancelled our gym subscription, and that will cover Christmas, I hope. It's still not going to be, I used to spend hundreds and hundreds on Christmas, so it's still not going to be much of a Christmas really. It's going to be economy, but then, you know, I don't feel so bad if I spend on other people and go over, you know, overboard. But I don't like breaking budget because, you know, I don't know what I've done with the money sort of thing. It's just like water, it's come in and it's gone out sort of thing. So there we are. I think that is about all I have to report, except that the UFC is back, isn't it, this next week in China. So look out for my predictions video for that. And of course, the fireworks on the Stray that we went to, and I recorded as ever. That is going up as well. Super night with the family, absolutely fantastic. It's become a tradition to go to the fireworks on the Stray, and then to spend the night sort of talking and socialising. And we have hot dogs and tomato soup. Don't ask me where that mixture came from, but that's what we do.